Hey, what's your name?
Lion.
Lion.
Nice to meet you.
That's the strongest name we've had all night. Go ahead, Lion.
So 2 questions. I have a book. Would you like to buy it? And secondly, can I get a free book? No, just kidding. So you're a very logical person, probably one of the most logical I've met. On the way here, me and a couple friends were discussing the scenario where someone somewhere in a desert, lives on their own, lives their whole life. Nobody has preached the gospel to them. They die. Do they have salvation and do they get into heaven?
This is one of the most challenging moral questions in Christianity. What happens to those who die without ever hearing about Jesus? If salvation comes through Christ alone, is it fair for God to condemn someone who never had the opportunity to believe? In this Q&A session, a student named Lion asked Frank Turek tough questions about God's justice and the fate of the unreached. He also raises a deeply personal question. What about infants and young children who die before ever knowing Christ? These are weighty moral concerns that many people wrestle with. If God is truly just, wouldn't he make a way for everyone to have a fair chance at salvation? And if young children die, do they automatically go to heaven? Stay tuned as we unpack these difficult but important theological issues and explore how God's justice and mercy work together.
You're basically asking, what about those that have never heard? And I have a slide for that, but it's way over there. Okay? First of all, this is a moral question. Right, Lion?
Yes.
Because if someone were to say, no, they don't go to heaven, then we would say, God, you're immoral.
Right.
Is God immoral if he knows that somebody is not going to accept the gospel if he never tells them the gospel?
It's a great question. I would say no.
Right, I agree. See, God knows who's going to believe and who doesn't. And in Acts 17, Paul says that God has appointed the times and places where people should live so that some would reach out to him and find him, though he's not far from any one of us. In other words, it seems to say that God has oriented the world in such a way that those who hear the gospel, some of them will believe. It could be that people who never hear the gospel wouldn't have believed it anyway, right?
Right.
We know that there are people out there who hear the gospel and don't believe it, right? But it could be that those who never heard it wouldn't have believed it anyway. But there is nobody out there who's never heard that God exists. Everybody knows God exists by his effects, as we said before. If there's a creation, there's got to be a creator. If there's a moral law, there's got to be a moral lawgiver.
Right.
Even the moral law that Matthew was talking about before, he has a moral law in his heart. Where does that moral law come from? If there is no God, it's just a socio-biological feeling. It's not really true.
Right.
All right? But if God does exist, and we really believe that there are these rights and wrongs, we reason back to a moral lawgiver, okay? So everybody knows there's a God, but not everybody knows about Jesus.
Right.
We know that people in the Old Testament could have been saved without Jesus, not without his sacrifice, without knowing him. The Bible seems to indicate you have to know the name in order to be saved, so what do? We're obedient, and we risk all to get people the gospel because we know that does save people. That if they know the gospel and accept it, they are saved.
Right.
But at the end of the day, since God is just, nobody in the afterlife is going to be treated unjustly. Either people are going to get justice or they're going to get grace. There's nobody who's going to say, God, if I had only known, God, you blew it, you didn't give me. Not going to happen. Make sense?
It does.
All right. Thank you.
And this would be the same grace that would apply to like children who have unfortunately passed or different things like that.
Yes. And the Bible seems to indicate, based on what happened to David's son, that those babies are taken to heaven. But if that's not the case, God is still going to be just.
Here's another question. The children who pass, do they grow up in heaven or do they stay in
If people don't grow in heaven, all men are going to be infants in heaven.
It's true.
Children. Because we don't grow up while we're here. We don't know. It's total speculation, right?
Yeah.
What age are you going to be when you get to heaven? What age do you want to be when you get to heaven? 21. 21. Nolan said 21. Younger than this, somebody in the back with a bad back. Said younger than this. Okay. We don't know. Maybe 33. That was Jesus, right? Who knows?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Lion.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
The question of whether those who have never heard the gospel can be saved is one of the most difficult and commonly asked objections to Christianity. It challenges our understanding of the God's justice, mercy, and the necessity of faith in Christ for salvation. Frank Turek's response highlights Acts 17:26-27, where Paul states that God has appointed the times and places where people should live so that they would seek him. This suggests that God, in his omniscience, places individuals in circumstances where they have the opportunity to respond to his revelation, whether through nature, Romans 1:20, conscience, Romans 2:15, or direct evangelism. Some theologians argue that those who never hear the gospel may be judged based on how they respond to God's general revelation. Dr. William Lane Craig, in Reasonable Faith, suggests that God ensures that all who would respond to him positively will have access to the truth. If someone is genuinely seeking God, God will make a way for them to find him. Lyon's second question about infants who die young is deeply emotional. David's statement in 2 Samuel 12:23, after his infant son dies, suggests that he believed the child was with God. I will go to him, but he will not return to me. Many theologians, including Charles Spurgeon, argue that infants and young children who die are covered by God's grace. Ultimately, while we may not have every answer, we can trust that God is both just and merciful. As C.S. Lewis notes in Mere Christianity, God does not judge us by what we do not know, but by what we do with what we know. For more in-depth study, check out the recommended books in the description.